call this meeting of the Municipal Council to order at 7 o'clock. Please join me in salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We are operating under suspended rules. Given the number of speakers for one of the public hearings, we'll be taking the quicker public hearings first. So, that being said, we won't be approving any minutes this evening. So, City Clerk Jackson, would you please read the notice for the first public hearing?
Certainly.
Thank you.
First public hearing, continued joint public hearing to discuss the rezoning petition filed by Diane Rose, 1290 County Street, also known as Assessors Plat, number 148, lot number 4.
Thank you. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Please come to the podium. Oh, yep. Both of these are joint public hearings, so before you speak, we're just going to wait for the planning board to come.
Absolutely.
Gary was just here.
Let me go get him.
He heard it, Kate. Okay. Gary,
He's ready?
Yeah.
he was standing there.
Okay.
Welcome, planning board. Nice to see you all. Okay. And then if you could just have your name and address for the record, please.
Daniel Campbell, Level Design Group, 249 South Street, Plainville.
Okay, floor is yours.
Good evening. The petition in front of you is for Ms. Diane Rose. The request is modification of her property, which is this square parcel 4, which is currently in the SRD district, to modify it to the GRC district, which is the property directly adjacent. I apologize. So we're looking to rezone this parcel from SRD to GRC. Knowing that the GRC is immediately next door, Ms. Rose is looking to do that so that she may subdivide her property and build a second home for her daughter.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Do we have anyone to speak against? Please come to the podium.
Yeah, my name is Paul Rotatakis, 1284 County Street, Millstream, Unit 31. I've asked for the plans that to be submitted. No plans were submitted. Have no idea what the structure is going to look like. No size, no location. So I'm confused on why we're even having this here, because nobody's had a chance to review anything.
Sure, so this public hearing isn't about a particular project, it's about a rezone. That's what we're looking at, is we're looking at the rezone, not the project. So we can try to get you, if you can leave your address with Virginia.
I have.
Okay, we can try to get any plans if they have them.
Yeah, because not knowing what the property's going to look like, I look right out the front door of my house or my unit. I don't know where the property's going to be located. I don't know what the unit's going to, how big the residence going to be, or where it's going to be obstructing my view. Nothing.
Okay, we'll see if we can get a set of plans to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have anyone else to speak against? Anyone to speak against? Do we have anyone to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Seeing none, Council Sawyer, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not.
I declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, will you please go on to a reading of the second communication, which anyone reading on the agenda will actually be listed third?
Second public hearing regarding the request to amend Section 2-12 of the revised ordinances by striking the current section in its entirety and replacing it with disposition of property tangible supply, 2-12.1A, subject to paragraphs B and C below. Any city department having a tangible supply, which terms shall include but not limited to as office furniture, computers, file cabinets, workstations, student desks, office machines, kitchen equipment, building maintenance equipment, recreation equipment, no longer useful to the department, but having resale or salvage value. Full amendments available at the City Council office, council@cityofattleboro.us.
Thank you. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in favor? Do we have anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Council Reynolds, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
No, I do not.
Okay, I declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, will you read the communication for the third and final public hearing for this evening?
Certainly. Third, continued joint public hearing to discuss the rezoning petition, to discuss a rezoning petition from San Rose Realty LLP by Ronald Carty to rezone Assessors Plat number 18, lot 500S, 500U, and 500V from planned highway business to general residence A.
Thank you. Before we get going, we will ask Council Sawyer, Vice President Dolan, to let the record show they've recused themselves. Where this is a continuation of a public hearing held initially last month, we will only be taking new testimony this evening. If you have spoken previously, we will not, you're not allowed to speak again unless you have new testimony. I do understand the attorney, Ed Casey, does have some follow-up, as was requested by this board. We'll allow him to speak, then we will get into the rest of the speakers. So do we have anyone to speak in favor?
Mr. President, members of the council, Madam Chair, members of the planning board, my name is Ed Casey. I'm a lawyer with an office at 144 Bank Street in Attleboro, and I represent the applicant. On October 1, I presented the arguments for the rezoning of these three parcels of land located on Curtis Avenue, Rex Avenue, and Washington Street that would allow a maximum of 23 residential units. I provided proof that the land identified in the rezoning application had once been zoned general residence and that it was rezoned in the late 70s to allow for the development of the Attleboro Mall. In fact, there were homes on the south side of Curtis Avenue. If anyone has any doubt, I have copies of the Sanborn maps from 1970 showing housing on the south side. And while
Mr.
it's a
Casey, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you could, at the end of the presentation, if you could leave a copy of those maps with Virginia so she can distribute to the planning board as well as the council.
I shall.
Thank you.
While it is appropriate to consider the neighbors' views in deciding to rezone property, the ultimate question is a broader one: whether the rezoning serves the public welfare. That phrase, public welfare, is related to the appraiser's determination of the highest and best use, but it's a more general inquiry. Public welfare is determined by reference to the city's own comprehensive plan and the state's well-publicized goal of increasing housing. Both the city and state have made clear that additional housing is vital to the public welfare. I submit that putting businesses in this area, as is allowed by right in the planned highway business zone, is not in the public welfare and is not even the highest and best use, and certainly would have a negative impact on the neighbors. At the October 1 hearing, opponents of the rezoning raised questions and issues relating to the rezoning for which I did not have complete answers. And the public hearing was continued to allow me to respond to those concerns. So first, Didn't the 1988 U.S. Court of Appeals decision in the John Bersani versus EPA case prohibit any development of the land? And the answer to that is no. Pyramid, which was the developer, proposed to remove 32 acres of the 50-acre wetlands in order to build the mall and to create an alternate wetland site some 3 or 4 miles away. The EPA overruled the decision of the Corps of Engineers approving the project. The appellate court upheld the decision of the EPA. The only issue that was before the court related to Pyramid's plan to excavate the wetlands and build a mall. The court decision only addressed that aspect. The court decision had no bearing on the Cardi plan to develop its property. Second issue, isn't the water...
Counsel, I'm sorry. Do you have copies of that decision that you can also have?
I have it. Yes, I
Virginia
told you that.
distribute to us in the planning board? Thank you.
Second issue, isn't the water shortage so severe that the rezoning should be denied on those grounds? The answer to that is no. Whether to rezone the parcels or exercise your rights to declare a moratorium are two separate issues, evaluated by different standards. If the city believes that the water shortage is long-term, then it can consider a building moratorium. The city has the legal right to declare a moratorium to slow or stop development throughout the city while the city develops a plan for dealing with its growth. Any moratorium must be limited for a specific period of time. And during such time, the municipality must be devising a plan to resolve the problem. The water shortage issue is a city-wide problem and is not affected by 23 additional residences. At the City Forum last week, we learned that in April 2024, water was spilling over the Luther Dam. A 6-month drought has affected us all, but under normal circumstances, we have plenty of water. The decision to rezone property should be based upon the issues that I've just discussed, not the water shortage. Third, will there be any filling of wetlands? No. And Cheryl Guglielmo is a professional engineer, a former member of the planning board, who is here to speak to that issue in her capacity as a professional engineer, offering her opinion with a reasonable degree of engineering standards, that there is no filling of the land, there is no plan to excavate any of the wetlands, there is no plan to encroach upon the wetlands, there is no plan to disturb the 25-foot no disturb line with the plans that we have shown to you at the October 1 hearing. Any development activity will occur only after independent review of the plans by the city's own consulting engineers and after approval by the Conservation Commission. And the last issue is, will there be any flooding for the existing homes on Curtis Avenue? Cheryl will explain why, in her opinion, that the development as we've described will not adversely affect those residents. I ask Cheryl to come forward now, introduce herself.
Mr. Casey, before we do that, can I just open
Excuse
it up
me.
to see if there are any questions from either the planning board or the council? Councilor LeBoy.
Thank you. Just a brief question to understand the layout a little better. When I went to the prospective zoning, there was driveways on the south side of Curtis Ave. Were those the old residences' driveways, or were those paved after the fact? They are on the land that's in question today.
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that they're, having driven down the road myself, it appears that some individuals are making use of land that belongs to the Cardi family. And Ron Cardi and Peter Cardi are in the back. If you have knowledge that would address the question posed by the city councilor, I ask that you come forward, identify yourself, and answer that question.
Roland Cardy. I will address the answer in terms of on the street. To our knowledge, those were paved by some of the people that lived across the street. I have no personal, I can't identify who did what, but they weren't there at one point and they were there at another point. At what point they paved it, I can't really tell you, or who paved it. We did send out letters several years ago asking that the automobiles and everything else that was on the property be removed, and most people respectfully did remove them. But who put them where, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Planning board? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Casey. Thank you, Mr. Cardi. If Cheryl would like to approach, do you have any other testimony, or?
I don't.
Okay, do we have anyone else speak in favor?
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council, Madam Chair, members of the planning board. Some of you may remember me 8 years ago standing here very pregnant before I joined the planning board. 8 years ago, I have a 8-year-old and a 4-year-old now. For the record, Cheryl Guglielmo, principal at Dupree Engineering with offices at 2 Stafford Court. I've been at Dupree for about 18 years now, and I've been a project manager for San Rose, for the Cardi family, for about 9 years now. We actually started working on this project in 2015, exploring different options. And one of the first tasks that we took on for this project was to delineate the wetlands, because we knew how important it was to stay out of the regulatory buffers and the wetlands themselves. So we delineated the wetlands. We submitted an ANRAD, an abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation, to verify those wetlands with the Conservation Commission. The wetlands are heavily regulated. So those no disturb areas are very critical to what we can do here. All of the plans that were in our packet reflect those wetland edges and buffers. So it wasn't a concept, they're not GIS lines, they are accurate surveyed wetlands. As a condition of the ANRAD, we were asked to complete a flood study to determine what the 100-year flood elevation was associated with that wetland. So we determined what that elevation is, and that elevation is fully inside of the 25-foot no disturb zone. So anything that we're proposing is outside of the 100-year flood, as well as that 25-foot buffer zone. More recently, we've been performing more due diligence, and we completed test holes on the site to determine seasonal high groundwater. That info will be used to ensure that we have proper separation from the basement slabs to the groundwater, as well as to meet the city's requirements for groundwater recharge and water quality. We also want to make sure any best management practices that we propose, dry wells, infiltration ponds, that we have the proper separation to mitigate any drainage runoff from the site. So this proposal will have no net increase in stormwater from pre to post-development conditions. We're not going to improve any off-site flooding, but we will make sure that we mitigate any increase in impervious areas that are on the subject lots. Our intent right now is to meet all of the City of Attleboro Stormwater Management Ordinance, as well as the local wetlands protection rules and regulations and the Mass Stormwater Handbook. Beyond that, I was looking at the plans earlier and calculating some areas, and the original Cardi property with the furniture store going all the way back to Washington Street is about 80 acres. About 60 acres is wetlands or buffers, which is about 75% of the site. So all of that area is untouched by anything we're proposing or anything in the future. To break that down a little bit further, the lots subject to the zone change, so 500 S, U, and V, those total about 6.6 acres roughly. There's 4.4 acres of upland, meaning no wetlands, no buffers. So that's about 66% of the area that we're proposing is outside of the wetlands themselves. So I think that's important to note in the overall scale of this project. And that is all I have. Before I turn it back over, just, or any specific
Let me just see
questions?
if we have any questions from the council or the planning board. Mr. LaVoy.
Thank you. Are you able to submit a copy of that 100-year study to the council?
Submit a copy of,
Of like the study results itself on the 100-year flood plan?
yeah, so I believe we've already submitted it to Concom as part of another portion of this site, but I can check on that and we can get a copy.
Mr. Waterman.
This isn't an easy question for any of us to answer. But when you build a home, I assume you build a home for at least 50 years. That's just a guess on my part. I know my own home is 50 years old. Has the reality of climate change been taken into effect?
So that's a great question. We meet the ordinances that are outlined by the city of Attleboro. So I'm not sure if the city of Attleboro has introduced climate change projections. I know that a lot of municipalities and states have forecasted out the rainfall data. A lot of towns were using old rainfall data and those storms have increased. So whatever has been included in the stormwater ordinance that may or may not meet the intent of your question, but that is what we'd go by.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Okay, thank you.
That's the applicant's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casey. Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in favor? Do we have anyone to speak against? Please make your way to the podium. We'll just ask for your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name's Christine MacArthur, and I live at 30 Sullivan Street in South Attleboro. Good evening, Mr. President, municipal council members, and planning board members. I just introduced myself, so I'm speaking on behalf of residents of both Sullivan Street and Clayton Street, because we strongly believe that if the city of Attleboro approves San Rose's petition to rezone lots 500 S, U, and V, this will lead to lot 500T to be approved, creating a floodgate of any housing developer to apply for permits to construct residential housing on protected wetlands, setting a precedent for the city of Attleboro and adversely affecting any communities within the state of Massachusetts having a vested interest in preserving wetlands. One of our major concerns is emergency response time. We were in attendance on the October 1st meeting where Chief LaChance spoke, and it was disconcerting to hear his testimony with regard to emergency resources and response times that have been adversely affected by the addition of new downtown Attleboro apartment complex. The NFPA standard for 2022 states that 90% of the runs must be responded to within 6 minutes. In 2022, over 25% surpassed the 6 minutes, and 27% of runs surpassed 6 minutes in 2023. So these developments, especially the development of the 300-plus apartments that are being built on Newport Ave in the spring of next year, in addition to continued building, is definitely going to affect the response times, and will continue in putting South Attleboro residents at risk during an emergency, which could lead to civil lawsuits against the city. So that's something we'd like the board to consider. Secondly, the MBTA Affordable Housing Initiative, traffic and Attleboro commuter rails. I'm sure you've seen the traffic that comes off of exit 2A and 2B when you're heading northbound on 95 when you're heading towards Pawtucket or towards Market Basket, or also at Exit 4 when you're heading to the Attleboro MBTA. It just is, I've been taking the commuter rail for 23 years, and it's just, the traffic has just worsened. Sometimes it takes a good 20 minutes to get from the mobile station to the Market Basket. So then in May, this past May, the South Attleboro station reopened and is running on just one track. And it had only 7 times per day and is noticeably underutilized. We took pictures of just during a weekday where there were hardly any cars in the parking lot, at the South Attleboro station. A new station has been designed, but according to the State Rep Jim Hawkins in George Rhodes' Sun Chronicle article back in May, I quote, "A new station has been designed, but money to build it is still not available. The new station is expected to cost about $65 million. So with the 300-plus apartment complex being built on Newport Ave and no fully functional commuter rail station in South Attleboro, this will continue to cause enormous traffic problems for South Attleboro residents." We've already discussed, and I'd like to bring back to the table, the Bersani versus the US EPA case. We're not convinced that Judge McAvoy's decision does not apply, as San Rose Council contends. Judge McAvoy ruled in favor of the EPA prohibiting Pyramid from building the Emerald Square Mall on 32 acres of Sweden Swamp, supporting the final decision of the EPA. The 1987 appellate case was not just about the use of fill or building on uplands or wetlands. Judge McAvoy's ruling encompassed the protection of wildlife, vegetation, water quality impacts, flooding, and traffic concerns. These were all taken into consideration back in the 1987. They should still be considered today. Sweden Swamp provides diverse habitat for a variety of wildlife. If San Rose's petition to rezone is approved, these species will be driven out of Sweden Swamp and forced to migrate into neighborhoods seeking food and water resources. I don't know if you all remember back in 2020, at the beginning months of the pandemic, when restaurants had to close. Well, I know that I had lived there at least 18 years, and I never saw any rodents or rats on my property until then, because their dumpsters were empty and they were coming to neighborhood homes. In the Bersani appeal, Mike DeLand stated in his recommendation of the regional administrator that Sweden Swamp lies at the convergence of several small drainage systems that eventually empty into Narragansett Bay. The large size, steep sides, and restricted outlet of the Sweden Swamp Basin make it an effective flood storage area. In his recommendation, it was also determined that Sweden Swamp serves as a crucial flood water storage function and helps to control peak flows by releasing stormwater over time. Back in 1987, both Pyramid, the construction company, and the EPA agreed on that fact. We cross-referenced each listed species in Mike DeLand's recommendation against the Mass Wildlife List in 2024. There were 10 listed species observed to be present in Sweden Swamp during Mike DeLand's site inspection in 1984 that now appear on the Mass Wildlife's 2024 list as endangered, threatened, or species of special concern. Mike DeLand made a point to note that his recommendation that if no classification appears next to the species, which are highlighted here, that delineates either unclassified or is considered an upland species, where this rezoning wants to take place. We are requesting a new site inspection of Sweden Swamp to ensure that these species continue to be protected. And we could find no evidence that the 1987 Bersani versus US EPA decision has been overturned, and believe that Judge McAvoy's ruling still stands to prevent developers from applying permits to develop wetlands. As Mike DeLand described, Sweden Swamp is a classic New England red maple swamp, rich with ferns, mosses, sedges, bulrush, hawks, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. Geologically, a swamp like this takes hundreds of years to develop. Flooding. This past spring, rainfall hit Attleboro 1.5 to 2+ inches of rain within 24-hour periods during March and April. I know that residents on Clayton Street had experienced flooding even with 2 sump pumps running continuously. A portion of their yard was still flooded in June, and Clayton Street is at least 3 blocks from Curtis Ave, where this proposed construction is slated to begin. Disrupting the integrity of the swamp area will no doubt increase and worsen flooding for local residents. And who will be responsible for storm drainage management? And again, climate change plays a role in that as well. The pre-engineering concept plan submitted to the Attleboro Conservation Committee, the ACC provided us with the pre-engineering concept plans for the construction of Lot 500. A sewer easement was drawn alongside the wetlands, which possibly could be in contrast to the buffer zone requirement, but also ran through the wetlands. So this orange line here represents the sewer easement. And as you can see, so it's alongside the wetlands, but then also goes right into the wetlands. So we don't understand how this particular project wouldn't disturb the wetlands if this is part of the concept plans. Wouldn't digging and dredging be required for this type of sewer easement, which would compromise the integrity of the wetlands? In closing, we are imploring the Attleboro Municipal Council Committee, Planning Board, and the Conservation Commission to perform its due diligence and carefully review the materials supporting our opposition to the rezoning of Sweden Swamp. Rejecting the zoning petition is the only decision that makes sense and will be in the best interest for both the City of Attleboro and the South Attleboro community. We appreciate your time and thank both the Municipal Council and the Carty family for giving us the opportunity to voice our many concerns regarding the petition to rezone Sweden Swamp from public highway business to residential.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Councilor Fowler.
I would appreciate either if you could circulate the last document which you were showing us, and provide a copy
I
to.
would, just given the number of people that want to speak, if you could drop it off with Virginia in the council office, and then she can distribute it to the planning board as well as the council.
Of course.
All right.
The sewer easement?
Yes, please.
Will
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak against?
Good evening. My name is Brian Peterson. I live at 148 Curtis Ave. So I'm on the road that will be affected by the build at the beginning of Washington and Curtis. I've been there for 37 years. I'm probably the oldest one on the road. I bought the house from Pyramid Development when they were trying to build the mall. They bought all the homes on Curtis and Hackett as a buffer zone when they were planning the mall. And they did move a few homes from the south side where the driveways are. They were very small homes. I mean, back then, I don't think the laws were of what they are today for putting homes in the early 60s. My concern, and everybody has a right to build, I understand that, but my concern is, since I've been there, you've developed 4 duplexes on the north side, starting from the convenience store that used to be Leadham Hardware all the way down to the end of the street, which has added a lot more traffic on a dead-end street. And with that, people are multi-generational families living together. So now you have multiple vehicles and no place to park. So they're parking on the other side of the road, in driveways, and it's difficult to get down to the end of the road if you're having a party or a get-together, because there's cars on both sides. It's only meant for through traffic for one way. So with 27 units going at the beginning of the road, it's going to make it that much more difficult to get through. So my concern is, what's the parking going to be like? Will it affect Curtis Ave? I mean, it already does with the amount of duplexes they put there now. So, and going back to the flooding. So I've been there 37 years, driven down that street every day, lived in my house every day, and I've been flooded. The basement's flooded. It doesn't happen often, but because Washington Street's up here, and Curtis Ave to the swamp runs downhill. And all the water runs with it. It goes through the backyards, through the driveways, it eventually gets to my house at the end, and accumulates. And I have had flooding in the basement. It doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened. So that's one consideration. But it's mostly just the impact of traffic and parking. So when people come in now to park at that convenience store, which used to be Leadham Hardware, when you turn into Curtis Ave, it makes like almost a 90-degree turn, the way they developed the road, and everybody parks. You can't even see around the corner when you're trying to drive down the road or back up. And there's an automotive store that sells cars across Route 1. All their employees park on Curtis Ave. You can't even pass. It's tough. So my concern is that.
Do we have any questions for the speaker? Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else to speak against? Please approach the podium.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council and planning board and public in general. My name is James McGrath. I live at 130 Curtis Ave. I've been an Attleboro resident and homeowner since August of 1988. So I've seen a lot in that time. It's easy for those who don't live in the area and won't be affected by any changes to dismiss the concerns of those that do live there, the ones who live on the street and the surrounding areas, neighborhoods. Perhaps, like many other long-term residents, they may feel as I do. My feeling, and perhaps theirs, is that we are the voices of experience that you should be listening to. Based on our experiences of living there for the past 3, 4, 5 decades, and our knowledge of the area. Now, we've been told repeatedly that change is inevitable, suggesting that we have no choice, and we should just go along with whatever the present or future landowners want, or else we could get a business there. We understand that. And we're not trying to trample anyone's rights, but we are concerned naturally about our property. We're concerned about the environment. I agree with what previous speakers have said, and so I'm not going to repeat it, but this is my spiel. The beautiful well-drained soil that Mr. Ward has spoken of previously exists, I believe anyways, partly because the land is dehydrated right now, and much of it is washed away over the years, the 100 years or whatever it was that weren't drought years. Our entire area is potentially a riverbed. Now, any development, no matter how well engineered or intentioned, causes many changes. And that often translates into unforeseen consequences for those it's thrust upon. Now, Curtis Ave had multiple new duplexes built in the 90s, as was said. After that change, my yard had always run downhill from the street, and from, the property next door was kind of sloped. But after those duplexes were built, suddenly I had water running down my yard into my basement, and also, I'm sure because Hackett Ave is lower than Curtis Ave, it was essentially washing my yard out into that. So I wasn't looking to blame anyone. I'm not suggesting it's anyone's fault. It's just, this is what happens. This is one of those unintended consequences that we are all worried about, I believe. So anyways, I had to regrade my side yard, raise it up, build a little bit of a retaining wall, take the dirt from a hill that was existing on the property, and do all that with. And I also built sort of a little berm around my property to keep it from washing out into the neighboring yards on Curtis and Hackett. And I just say that not because I'm looking for special recognition, but just because, again, it's an unintended consequence. I didn't feel that there was anyone who was really concerned about it, so I needed to take my own action to solve a problem. So I did. Back to the thing, any development, no matter how well engineered or intentioned, can cause these change. And preliminary plans often do change. I think most people are going to kind of doubt that there isn't going to be any filling or any impact or any destruction of the wetlands, regardless of whether it's intentional or unintentional. Things happen. Things go wrong during construction. You know, something gets misread. Whatever the situation, there's a lot of potential for things to go wrong. The water already runs down our roads past our houses during the summer rainstorms and the winter snow melts, as Mr. Peterson can attest to, and others. And, you know, in other neighborhoods, like flooding frequently occurs on Collins Street and other low-lying areas. And I wonder, has anyone thought to ask why the many streets of South Attleboro suddenly stop? Or why one side of Route 1 is heavily built up with many streets and the other side isn't? Could it be the presence of that oddly shaped swamp? Or a 100-year flood, or a 500-year flood, or we don't know. But I find that uplands is an interesting term, considering that most of South Attleboro is a lowland. In the 1970s, Route 1 near Washington Square flooded. That I found on the Sun Chronicle, remember when, because that would be back when I was a toddler, so. I just find I find that very interesting. I love history, and certainly would want to do more research into this to find out what the climate has been in the past, what the climate may be in the future, and be a little bit better educated about what the potential impacts of this is. You've already heard a lot of other issues. You've heard about the EMS response times. You've heard about, you know, flooding concerns. You've already heard it, so I won't name them all. But at what point, when one zoning request or special permit or variance is issued, why not the next? What about the next parcel? What about the next street? What about the next neighborhood? I believe that the people who live in other areas, Clayton Street, Bel Air, Rex, Guild, there's a lot of them in that area. I believe that all their neighborhoods are experienced issues in the past and will experience issues in the future. Because I think that this rezoning request is essentially the beginning of the end for any undeveloped piece of land. And it's also, you know, the focus at one point was to build business, now the focus is to build housing. Well, 23 or 21 or 22 or 40 units of housing, whatever it ends up being, is really not going to change things for the state. And when we talk about public welfare, well, those of us who live in South Attleboro on Curtis Ave, Rex Ave, Hackett Ave, Clayton Street, and all the others that I can't name at the moment, we are the public. We are the public that will be affected by this. We are the people who live here, we are the people who work here, we are the people who vote here. And, you know, you have to realize that housing and the traffic it generates is a 24-hour issue. Businesses usually have set hours of operation. Some of our neighbors work the second and third shift. Amazon delivers early in the morning, late at night, whatever. There's lots of headlights shining in my windows, people turning around on the street. There's traffic congestion everywhere. And yes, with more people living there, obviously it will get worse. So hearing about all these issues and knowing, you know, the liability concerns for the delayed EMS and the wildlife issues and everything else, how is adding nearly 24 homes on this one street and then having hundreds more residents on other nearby lands, which some are already planned and approved and some are not yet, but probably will be future proposals? The questions become, what are those future proposals going to be? Are they going to be to, well, get a variance and maybe fill some of that wetland that wasn't part of the original proposal? Are our quiet, peaceful, dead-end streets going to be transformed into just another way to get from Route 1 to Route 1A? If so, that's certainly not desirable. And again, that certainly affects those of us, the public, that live there, work there, vote there. And I submit that additional residents simply mean more demand for city services, and more likely, more angry constituents when their elected officials in the city services, which are already struggling to meet the demands of who we have now, and the strains that are put on the budget, when they fail to live up to resident needs and expectations, I think that's not going to go well. That's when citizens tend to organize, litigate, and quite often vote to remove those from office, those that they feel have failed them in their environment. Because again, we have choices. We have a lot of choices. We have choices about where we shop, we have choices about where we live, we have choices about who we vote for, we have choices about who we recommend for various products and services. And that's about it. We also have a choice to whether to agree or object to these changes, and to ask that our voices be heard.
Thank you. Do we have any
Thank you.
questions for the speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else? Do we have anyone else to speak against?
Joseph Wardog, 35 Colts Way, Attleboro. Mr. President, city councilors, members of the planning board, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning changes. There are questions decision makers should ask and have those questions answered prior to deciding the merits of allowing zoning changes and housing to be developed in our city. First, where does the water go when the city takes a bath? Through rainfall or snowmelt? What pollutants in the form of fertilizer, insecticides, and road salt will be included in runoff from the property? Where does that runoff go? How will that runoff affect the swamp, 7 Mile River, then ultimately the 10 Mile River? Next, how will the development impact the current landscape in terms of wildlife, insect life, vegetation, and current and historical use? We also need to consider how the development would restrict replenishment of the groundwater. Will the development cause the surrounding areas to experience flooding? What will the impact to the already occupied land that abuts what will be the impact to the already occupied land that abuts the proposed development? What are the short-term and long-term impacts of the development? Construction traffic, homeowner traffic, pedestrians, the need for city services, water, electricity, firefighters, ambulances, police patrols, mail and package deliveries. The EPA determined that 32 acres of the site, Sweden Swamp, was not to be filled to develop a mall. The determinations made by the EPA should be read and considered as to whether or not these parcels adjacent to the swamp should be developed. We are experiencing historic drought conditions that question our city's ability to provide adequate water for the present inhabitants of our city. Just today, the state's Energy and Environmental Affairs Office declared that the majority of Massachusetts is now in critical drought. We should be looking to solve the current problems of our water supply before we add to the burden of delivering clean water to our residents. We should develop new sustainable sources of water for the city, not just emergency measures. We need to address response times for our fire and emergency services to maintain the safety of our residents. We should halt rezoning and further development until these issues that face us are resolved so that our city can grow responsibly. Thank you for your time, attention, and consideration of these questions before moving ahead with rezoning and approval of the requested changes.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Do you have anyone else to speak against? Please make your way to the podium.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jennifer Spalding. I live on Allenson Ave, a little further from Curtis. But we also run downhill. And I just wanted to come and state what has happened to me. I've owned the home for 20 years now. We never had flooding until a couple of years ago. With the varied rains that we've received, I actually had contacted the city and had engineers from the water department come out, look at the situation that was happening on the end of our cul-de-sac and flooding my basement, and was told that our piping there is 40+ years old, doesn't meet current code, and is unable to be repaired because homes have now been built on top of these different pipes. So at this point, there really isn't a reality for me to not flood again. We continue to flood every time. I have had $18,000 worth of damage roughly to my house. I'm a single mom. Taking care of that damage was very tough. I wasn't here for the first meeting on this subject matter a couple of weeks ago, but I was told that there was no flooding in South Attleboro, and I'm here to say there definitely was. And I was affected, our health was affected. There was mildew, potential mold. We had to have all of that repaired. I had to install sub pumps. Some of my neighbors didn't. They had sub pumps already. So I'm just here to say that, and I oppose this build, and I hope that you guys will take that into consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
What number, Allison?
What number?
71.
71.
Thank you.
71A, thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing
Thank
none.
you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak against? Please make your way to the podium.
Greetings, President and council members. My name is Lisa Friedlander, and I'd like to say hello to my neighbor, Mr. Carty. I am his closest neighbor on the last house on Hudson Street. So if you walk through my yard, I'm in their backyard. And I'm just here. I wasn't here at the prior meeting, but I had neighbors submit a flyer that they had concerns about this building. And I took a drive over to Curtis Avenue and took a look at the side of the street that's to be affected. And I could just speak from my experience. I've lived there 30 years, and the wetlands are never dry. They're always wet. We own a little over about 1.34 acres, and at the time we built, we were told that it would be flagged where the wetlands start, and we couldn't have any development past that. So we're paying taxes on property that we can't use, but that was to protect wetland property, and that meant something to us. When Carty's came to develop their property, there were many studies done and conditions in place for them to build that property, but our understanding was that they bought up that surrounding land around them so that no one else would ever be able to develop around there. And I know I have seen Lee's Pond flood across the street to the auto dealership across the street. Those are natural aquifers around there where there's sand and loose stone where water can run to. And when you go on Curtis Street, and I saw some of these driveways that looks like where there were prior properties, there used to be prior properties on Hudson Street as well, that when the builders wanted to build the mall, our builder, William Ward, said that studies were done and that there was like a species of salamander or something in there that was protected, and they ended up losing, he bought the land for pennies on the dollar. And he said, I'm going to put as many properties in there as I can. And there were some homes that were moved out of there. One was moved over to May Street. And they did put just as many homes in there. So when I hear there's plans to put 23 homes in there, that tells me they're going to get just as many in there as they can. But when I drove down there, I can see where there's areas where the land just drops off. There's steep pitches. So I can tell that there's trees in there, there's aquifers in there, that's all going to have to be built up to put homes on those spots. And that is a very tight, narrow street with a tight bend. I can't imagine the traffic with 23 homes and all those people going in there. This has been an unusual, dry period of time. But we only have to look at what happened in North Carolina and see the severe flooding that they had there that just wiped everything out. I've seen water come halfway up my backyard, and with ducks literally swimming in the water in my backyard when it does flood. And we were notified back in 2015 as well that we suddenly had to now have insurance, flood insurance on our property because the Flood Disaster Protection Act of 1973, a federal law, as amended by the National Flood Insurance Reform Act of 1994, required that flood insurance be purchased in special flood hazard areas, SFHA, as shown on maps published by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. And it was determined on August 11, 2015, that our home was in fact in flood zone AE, which could only be once in 100 years, but I'm pretty sure that what happened in North Carolina was that kind of flooding. And we had to have, I think we paid $335 a year for some flood insurance that just covers like $50,000 for the structure, nothing for, which doesn't even cover the cost of the home, and nothing for the contents inside. But it's just a minimal insurance that we have to carry, but that always has to be carried on that property. So I'm quite certain these other homes in that area could sustain flooding, and I'll have to carry that same insurance. So the area does flood. We are at the intersection of Bel Air and Hudson. I knew the people that were in their 80s back when we moved in the early 90s, and they always had a sump pump in their side yard and their home flooded. And I've seen, as you come out on Clayton Street and you make a right to go towards Carty's, that creek right there floods all the time and floods that portion of Newport Avenue. So I've seen that portion of Newport Avenue flood. I've seen the intersection of Bel Air and Hudson Street floods. It can't keep up with the storm. The storm drains can't keep up with it when there's heavy rains. Like I said, I haven't had it come in my home yet, but I've had to have it come halfway up my yard. So I'm quite concerned that 23 homes in there is just going to really have a lot more backup of water when there's severe flooding. There's just nowhere for it to go. And if you're filling in some of these natural aquifers, I just don't know what they're going to do in that situation. So, and there is every manner of wildlife. I can't even begin to tell you everything that we've seen go through our property over the years. And I haven't seen the black bear yet, although I heard this spring there was a black bear up a tree in Pawtucket. But we regularly have fishers and possum, and I've had 2 raccoons up a tree in my backyard. We've had box turtles, we've had possums and rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks and you name it, salamanders, all kinds of things out there. So I just speak for my concerns for the damage there could be in putting more units in there, filling in more natural aquifers, future flooding, and the wildlife. There's just no place for them to go. I mean, we've literally cooked out in our side yard, and we've heard wolves howling late at night because they're smelling the smells from our cookout, and they're coming that close to our property that we don't even want to go out there at night because they're that close. So there is nowhere for this wildlife to go. And I just don't think filling in that side of Curtis Street is going to do anything to help this situation. So I thank you for hearing my concerns and my experience.
No, thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Lisa, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Do you have anyone else? Do we have anyone else to speak against? Please make your way to the podium.
Jesse Olson, 128 Curtis Ave. So everyone's already talked about, a little nervous, y'all. Oh, jeez.
Don't be nervous. It's just a conversation. You'll be just fine.
I usually do these over Zooms. Okay. So my concern is the flooding, obviously. Sweden Swamp provides a natural buffer for the heavy rains. Curtis Ave only has one storm drain on that whole street, and it's at the top of the street where the curve is, which consistently floods to begin with once we have a heavy rain. So my question, I guess, to the city is, are you going to put more storm drains in? Are we ever going to get sidewalks on our street? I understand the street is very small. I agree with the guy at the end of the street that someone has a party, there's no parking. There's no parking. They had open house the other couple weeks ago when someone hit 2 cars trying to back out. The curve at the top of the street when you're coming in, you can't see anything if there's cars parked there. And you can't see around the curve. Anytime I try to pull onto Curtis Ave, especially during like a weekend off of Route 1, I literally looking in my rearview mirror hoping not to get rear-ended, because people are speeding down that road and they don't realize that you could have your blinker on 3 streets ago and they still don't think you're going to turn somewhere. So that's my only concern I wanted to bring. I agree with what everybody said though. Okay.
We'll take those 2 questions you asked as a takeaway as well. I'll ask Councilor LaVoy to look into this as he's overseeing the committee while the other 2 have recused themselves. Will do. Do you have any questions for Jesse? Okay. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks.
You did great. Do we have anyone else to speak against?
Good evening, Council President Delicio and members of the Council and the Planning Board. My name is Laura Abrams. My address is 35 Cumberland Street in South Attleboro. I'm very concerned about developing so close to a natural aquifer at Sweden Swamp. And I want to read something that was from the EPA decision that I don't think has been mentioned yet. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and other knowledgeable individuals, based upon this review, I determined depositing dredged or filled material within the 32-acre portion of Sweden Swamp would result in unacceptable adverse effects to wildlife and wildlife habitat. Specifically, the loss of this habitat would adversely affect the wildlife populations, examples given birds, mammals, and amphibians, at the immediate site. In addition, the project would result in the permanent loss of 32 acres of forested wetland habitat, and although Pyramid has offered to recreate other wetlands on site, doing so would result in the at least temporary destruction of 13 of the remaining 17 acres of wetland habitat and the creation of wetlands offering dissimilar habitat values to those existing wetlands. And I bring that up because I think that quote is still very applicable today, that even just building adjacent to it and not going into the swamp, there's still going to be runoff from pesticides, as other people have mentioned. There's still going to be oil and grease coming off cars, going into the swamp. Rains are not going to be able to drain into that area quite as easily, and it's going to affect local wildlife. And I think that this is a very important thing, that I don't think that this land should be rezoned for that particular purpose, and they should refrain from building upon it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, Laura, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else to speak against? Anyone else? Please make your way to the podium. Good evening.
Hi, Mr. President, council members, and planning board. My name is Patrick Stippa. I live on 65 Zor Avenue. My family and I, we moved here about a decade ago. I really love this city. There's nothing I can really say I dislike about it. And it's always nice to learn more about the history, and the previous speaker was talking about the Leadham hardware store. Oddly enough, the house I bought was owned by the Leadhams. So I've learned a lot about the town, the history, and how everything has grown over time. But I also want to focus on the future. You mentioned climate change before. I mentioned, right now we're in a level 3 critical drought. I use well water for my house. There's many times right now where sometimes the water seems to be getting quite low. There's times where we've had to get reviewed recently where the aquifer is much lower than when I bought it just a decade ago. When I bought my house in 2015, rated the house as good, normal usage for upwards of 8 to 10 people at any time. Just 2 years ago, now maybe 4 to 6 people for regular usage. That is a nearly 50% decrease. Now we have it where the water usage, I had to walk by a drought, don't use your water sign to come in. There's more and more directions telling us to be safe. I have a 6-year-old here. If everything goes right, I'll live the rest of my life here. It's a town I want to help get better, the town I want to help grow. But for the greater good, getting some houses, opening up potential, as people said, of adding extra options. My great fear is, like they said, they'll get this one. In the Chronicle article, it said most likely they'll want to move on and get the additional parcels, expand into the swamp. Then where do we go beyond that? Cramming more people in, but then having the existing homes get ruined. I don't know if that's what we want for our city, where we want to go forward. I'm not going to rehash all the details that my fellow members of the city have shared, because it's all on the record. I would just ask, let's not rush and make a decision. Let's not do something, we're going to add some homes, to only destroy what I've really grown to love in the short time I've been here.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Name and address again, please.
Can we just get your name and address one more time for the record, please?
Patrick Stippa at 65 Zor Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak against?
Nobody else is going to say anything. I'll come up.
I believe there's someone coming up.
Oh, sorry. No, you go ahead. I'll go last.
Hi, Julie Rigby, 72 Holly Street, South Attleboro, Mass. I don't believe Cotties should pay tax on property that cannot be used. Sweden Swamp is a natural resource important to the city and the environment, and it calls for some creative thinking. I'm very happy that Cotties selected Attleboro for one of their stores, and they've been a good neighbor. I believe the city must find a way to relieve this onerous tax burden on Cotties while protecting the environment that Sweden Swamp has provided in this area, as well as protecting the surrounding neighborhood from future flooding. Flooding has now become a major concern, as we've had several incidents recently, as we've heard from everyone, including my family. The map shows greenland around the swamp, the so-called buildable area. But how are those homes and condos going to affect the water table? How is the runoff from the parking areas and the lawns going to affect the swamp? The 1988 decision by the EPA that Mr. Case referred to also said, in summary, Sweden Swamp provides many wetland values, such as wildlife habitat, food chain production, natural flood storage, groundwater discharge, and water quality renovation. On October 18th, the Attleboro Sustainability Commission unanimously voted to recommend that the City Council vote no to the rezoning petition by Sanrose Realty. Objectively, Sweden Swamp includes its immediate surroundings is ecologically important to the South Attleboro area. The Attleboro Comprehensive Plan, 2012, states that we must provide an unobstructed floodway in all watercourses by requiring the removal of all unnecessary obstruction. I mean, that could help in some of the flooding, even as it exists now. The Hazard Mitigation Plan and Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, 2020, describes how more intense and frequent rain events should be expected as precipitation during heavy rain events in the Northeast increased by more than 70% between 1958 and 2010. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has seen the number of rainfall observations above 5 inches increase 103% between 1958 and 2018. According to the 5th National Climate Assessment, the Northeast United States is facing the largest increase in extreme precipitation events in the country. The 10-Mile River Mitigation Project of North Attleboro, 2024, describes how they have begun to experience the impact of climate change. Heavy precipitation and flooding are among the top climate hazards that create significant damage in the area, and there has been a significant increase in the intensity and frequency of precipitation over the past 50 years. At the moment, there are 48 units under construction in South Attleboro, plus the new development at the mini Gulf of another 340 apartments. That's a lot of housing for South Attleboro. The state is promoting more building, but please, not all in Attleboro. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you, Julie.
Okay. Hello. My name is Ellen Farmer. I used to live in Attleboro, 120 Augsburg, which backs up to beautiful wetlands. But I'm the voice of Christmas scary future. Where I grew up, down south, I drive home and I recognize very little. They filled in, townhouses were big, they needed housing, I get it. The DC, Northern Virginia area was growing. I grew up in the military family. But I rode horses and we hunted and we had a blast because there was open space and farms. None of that is there. And the worst was when I went home and I went back to my old neighborhood to see it. And my brother warned me, he said, be careful. It's not what it was. It's going to break your heart. And sure enough, Washington and the troops had ridden through during the war. Very historical area. Manassas Battlefield is out there. But let me tell you, there was no wetlands protection. There wasn't water concerns. They just dig and build and filled. And I went down, certainly, and what was 200-year-old trees and more, beautiful brooks, was rows and rows of townhouses. It was all gone. Miles of it was gone. And I went to the old farms. None of them were there. They just filled it in and mowed it over. And it's all these artificial malls and shopping areas. Tyson's Corner was the first mega mall where I grew up. They were everywhere after that. I'm just the voice of, once you build it and once you dig into a wetlands, you cannot fix that. You can't recreate it. You can plant a few plants. It does not fix it. And I have been on Curtis Street. I have a friend who lives there. And they have deer every morning that you can see running through there. And I walked my dog back in there. I don't see where you could build safely and not damage a wetland and the water area there. So I'm just that voice of, I have seen it and I've seen the destruction. And once it's gone, it breaks your heart. And I understand the flooding. Oh my Lord, some of the areas that we knew people who still lived in that area, there was serious flooding where they had taken the brooks supposedly and moved the area and put in piping. It didn't really fix the area. They didn't really spend enough time in detail. in design, and that's really important. I have to say that enough. You really have to think about that. But once it's gone, and it was a beautiful area where I grew up, and it's just all gone. We even moved a highway that I grew up with, a small highway. I got lost. I had to call him and say, well, how do I get, Braddock Road is gone, where do I go? So I'm just the voice of future. You know, the world is changing, the environment we know is changing, just heads up. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker?
Oh, and the 100-foot, 200-foot state is, I worked on conservation in Dover and Sherburne, because that's where I landed when I first moved here. I don't understand 25 feet, I've never heard of that, but they all went by the state regs, and I don't think any of this would pass by the state regulations of buffer zones and water protection. That was just the final say.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak against? Anyone else to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Councilor Lavoy, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not.
Chair Bonet, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
No, I don't.
I declare this public hearing closed. Thank you. Thank you, planning board, as always. I would entertain a motion to take a 5-minute recess.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. to bring this meeting of the Municipal Council back to order at 8:21. I would entertain a motion to enter into Committee of the Whole.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are now in a Committee of the Whole. Would anyone wish to address the council on any piece of business? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to arise from Committee of the Whole.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We have now risen from Committee of the Whole. We will now go into a reading of the mayor's communication. Excuse me, folks. We're having a difficult time hearing up here. Thank you. Nope, no worries. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. November 19th, 2024. Dear Municipal Council, for your information, I regret to inform your honorable body we have received the resignation of Constable Terrence McCrossan. Please join me in thanking Mr. McCrossan for his service to the city.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCrossan. That's an FYI.
I respectfully submit for confirmation by your honorable body the appointment of Carol Katoya, 5 Greenfield Street, to the Taxation Aid Committee.
That's going to go to Personnel, Veterans, Human Services, and spoiler alert, you're going to be pretty busy over the next week. Oh, no.
I respectfully submit a communication from Veteran Services Director Ben Quell regarding the donation of $70 in King Barbara gift vouchers from Jean and Donna Lavoie. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro.
Personnel, Veterans, Human Services.
I respectfully submit a communication from Veteran Service Director Ben Quell regarding the donation of $650 in Stop and Shop and Market Basket gift cards from the Holiday Spirit Committee. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro.
Personnel, Veterans, Human Services Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Director of Veteran Services Ben Quell regarding the donation of $250 in Stop and Shop gift cards from Rosemary Burrows. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro.
Personnel, Veterans, Human Services, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Director of Recreation regarding the need to pay 2 fiscal year '24 invoices to Filion Associates Incorporated totaling $839.52. A vote authorizing payment is needed to satisfy this debt. There is no transfer of funds needed to pay these bills, as there is sufficient funding in Fund 2614.
Personnel, Veteran, no, I'm just kidding. Finance.
I respectfully submit a communication from Attleboro Public Schools Director of Finance, Mark Furtado, regarding the following fiscal year '24 fiscal obligations that were not received in time to be processed in the normal fiscal year '24 business cycle. Vendor Michael Whitfield, the amount is $298.82. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body to authorize the school department to pay this previous year's school billing total $298.82 as identified in Mr. Furtado's communications.
Finance Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Council on Aging Director Kelly Lee regarding the donation of $700 in Stop and Shop and Market Basket gift cards from the Holiday Spirit Committee. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro.
City Property and Claims, please.
I respectfully submit a land donation from Woodlock Development Corporation shown as parcels B and C as designated on the attached protected open space plan for Dove Lane, Attleboro, Massachusetts, dated January 18, 2024, and revised June 5, 2024, by Farland Corporation. They are adjacent to other parcels of land owned by the city and will be dedicated for conservation and preservation purposes. Prior to recording of the deed and conveyance to the city, all required funds will be paid. Therefore, I respectfully request that your honorable body accept this land donation from Woodlock Development Corporation.
City Property and Claims, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Director of Planning and Development, Carrie Arasian, regarding the need for funds for police details that are needed during field work performed by the city's consultant engineers associated with the GSI study. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $1,640 from the citywide reserve fund for transfer account to the citywide transfer to grant, and further transfer $1,640 to the MVP Green Stormwater account for police details.
Public Safety, please.
As the drought continues and our water supply becomes increasingly critical, it is imperative that we supplement our water supply with other sources. and I am pleased to inform you that the town of Mansfield has agreed to provide some emergency water to the city through an emergency water interconnection. This emergency interconnection will first be established via a temporary above-ground hydrant to hydrant hose connection for immediate use, to be replaced with a jointly constructed permanent underground connection within the next few months. Although currently unknown, the cost to construct the permanent connection could be substantial but will be equally borne by each municipality, as each will benefit mutually from this emergency interconnection. In order to effectuate this arrangement, an intermunicipal agreement, IMA, water purchase contract is needed between the City of Attleboro and the Town of Mansfield. This 20-year agreement will allow for the sale and purchase of water between the municipalities if and when an emergency need arises. The IMA will be presented for approval to the Mansfield Select Board tomorrow night and has been approved as to form by City Solicitor Peter Mello. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body to approve the intermunicipal agreement water purchase contract with final edits as approved by the City Solicitor and Mansfield Town Council. In accordance with Article 2, Section 2-9B of the City Charter of the City of Attleboro, I respectfully request your honorable body to consider this as an emergency measure.
Public Works Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from City Social Worker Kate Robinson regarding the donation of $725 in Stop and Shop and Market Basket gift cards from the Holiday Spirit Committee. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro.
City Property and Claims, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from City Auditor Deborah Gould regarding ARPA funding for personnel expenses of the Water Enterprise Fund. Due to the drought, the city is likely to be purchasing water from both the City of Pawtucket and the Town of Mansfield in volumes not anticipated when the fiscal 2025 budget was developed. In addition to this unanticipated expense, the city has implemented a number of water use restrictions that have and will continue to negatively impact the revenue collected in the water enterprise system. At this time, council approval is needed to commit and utilize $500,000 of available unobligated ARPA funds to allowable water-related personnel expenses. It is also requested that this matter be entertained as an emergency measure. Upon approval of this request, the accounting department will work with the water department to shift allowable expenses from the Water Enterprise Fund to the ARPA Grant Fund. This reclassification will ultimately provide the ability for funds to be transferred through a future vote of the council to accounts within the Water Enterprise Fund. Therefore, I hereby request authorization to commit and utilize $500,000 of available unobligated ARPA funds to allowable water-related personnel expenses. In accordance with Article 2, Section 2-9B of the City Charter of the City of Attleboro, I respectfully request your honorable body to consider this as an emergency measure.
Public Works Committee, please.
Sincerely, Kathleen D. Simone, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now go on to a reading of your communication.
Thank you. November 19th, we have received a Class 2 renewal application from Lime Rock Motors, LLC, 728 Washington Street for 4 customer parking spaces and 48 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We have received a Class 2 renewal application from 97 Emery Street, LLC, for 7 customer parking spaces and 30 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We have received an amusement arcade license application from A.T. Demoulas, doing business as Market Basket, 1200 Newport Avenue, for 2 amusement rides.
License Committee, please.
We have received a Class 2 renewal application from North Main Street Auto Division of K&L Tire and Automotive Company, doing business as New England Tire, 44 North Main Street, for 17 customers parking spaces and 1 display space.
License Committee, please.
We have received a certificate of vote from the Planning Board meeting held on Monday, November 4th, 2024. The Planning Board voted in the affirmative to recommend to the Municipal Council the adoption of the following proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance relative to the MBTA Communities Overlay District, as presented by the Director of Planning and Development during the joint public hearing held on October 31st, 2024. Please note that the adoption of the proposed zoning amendments will include the adoption of the MBTA Communities Overlay District map. Also, please note that the adoption of the proposed zoning amendments requires a majority vote of the Honorable Municipal Council, not a 2/3 vote.
Zoning and land use, please.
That concludes all communications this evening.
Very much. We will now go into Committee reports, and we will start with Councilor Foa.
The IT and Infrastructure Committee meeting has no business this evening. Cancel. I'll call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time. If I may also address the Special Committee on Rules and Procedures, it is also canceled for this evening, and I request a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
I appreciate the diligence.
Thank you.
Councilor Lavoy.
Thank you, President Delicio. Reporting for the License Committee from the docket of November 5th, 2024, and move to approve the following Class 2 renewal applications. Trusted Auto, Inc. at 64 Pleasant Street with 5 parking spaces and 18 display spaces. Attleboro Auto Clinic, LLC at 42 County Street with 10 customer spaces and 28 display spaces. And 100% Auto Wholesalers located at 21 Washington Street with 10 customer spaces and 48 display spaces.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Discuss these in committee.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. From the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to approve the following Class 1 renewal application from Chevrolet Buick of GMC, Attleboro, 103 Washington Street with 84 customer spaces and 288 display spaces.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Discuss this in committee.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this is also a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. From the docket of November 19th, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the following 2 amusement arcade license applications. Chuck E. Cheese, located at 287 Washington Street for 65 video games, and Post 312, located at 437 Newport Ave for 1 pool table and 1 jukebox.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Discuss this in committee.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
That is all the business we have this evening. I'll call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. We'll now recognize Council Reynolds, who will be pinch hitting for Councilor Cobus.
Thank you. Reporting for the Finance Committee from the docket of November 19th, 2024. I move to transfer $268.26 from account 161010000-511000 library salaries to account library prior year time earned.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
I have none.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Aye.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to transfer $955 from account health professional services to account health bills from previous years.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to transfer $500 from account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account in health in-state travel.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
I have none.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. That is all the business the Finance Committee has this evening, but we would like to call a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you very much. We will now recognize Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you.
Reporting for city property and claims, I only have one motion this evening from the docket of November 19th, 2024. I move to declare the following as surplus and available for disposition to trade in or sell. 2 Ford PI utility trucks, not utility trucks, I'm not sure if they're trucks, I just know they're PI utilities. 2015 and 2014, they're both in poor condition.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
I have none.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Mr. Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
And that is all the business city property and claims has, and I would look forward to a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Vice President Dolan.
Thank you. Reporting for Public Works Committee from the docket of November 19th, 2024. I move to accept a donation from the Technical Assistance, from Technical Assistance from the Massachusetts Initiative Program, MDI, to produce a downtown pedestrian access study and provide services related in the amount of $25,000.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
I have none. We discussed them tonight.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes? Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you, and I have two emergency measures for tonight as well. From the docket of December 3rd, 2024, I move that the council adopt the following emergency preamble. Excuse me. That the Attleboro Municipal Council vote to take action as provided in the city charter, section 2-9B, regarding the water emergency which presently exists relative to the request of the mayor to approve the intermunicipal agreement water purchase contract with the town of Mansfield with final edits as approved by the city solicitor and the Mansfield Town Council.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
This is just to declare an emergency, this is the emergency preamble to the next motion.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you. From the docket of December 3rd, 2024, I move to approve the request of the mayor as an emergency measure to approve the intermunicipal agreement water purchase contract with the town of Mansfield, which final edits were approved by the city solicitor and the Mansfield Town Council.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
President Delicio and I met with the mayor and Deb Gould earlier before tonight's meeting and discussed briefly, everybody knows what's going on with the water situation, and so the town of Mansfield was kind enough to put up a temporary hose to hose, hydrant to hydrant, like Clerk Jackson read, exactly what's going to happen there, for us to be able to get immediate assistance with water. Am I forgetting anything that we discussed in the meeting?
Yeah, a couple different things on this. So, as the Vice President said, we spent a lot of time with the mayor, with the auditor. I was with the mayor and Town Administrator Dumas from Mansfield Friday night discussing where we're at. First of all, it's really imperative that we thank Mansfield for stepping up, volunteering to help us in this situation. This is going to set up a situation where we'll be able to get anywhere from 250 to 500 million, I think it's 250 million gallons a day from Mansfield. 1,000, correct. As well as this will give us some time until two things happen. One, we bring Pawtucket online. Hopefully, we're shooting sometime in December. Also, we're doing rain dances, praying for a lot of rain, where we might get some Thursday and Friday. This will be a planning mechanism which will far exceed whatever we're going through right now. And there's going to be switches and valves which will allow, say 10 years from now, Mansfield's in this situation, we will have this intermunicipal agreement where we will sell our water to them by flipping that switch and vice versa. This is going to help us buy some time until we can get some storms. This is also going to help us plan for future. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot we can't control. And this is one of the things where I think we can control and will help as a planning mechanism. So I think kudos to the city, the town of Mansfield, their DPW, their water, their sewer departments, as well as, Peter Mello, Deb Gould, the mayor, Courtney Allen. This has been a true collaboration, which is really coming in at a critical time. I think that's about it.
Exactly.
Any questions, comments, concerns on this? Council Sawyer?
It definitely is great that Mansfield is willing to help us do this, and I just was wondering what the cost of the water from Mansfield, that we'd have to give to Mansfield for this water,
Yep, it's an important question, and I think that it's, what was it?
1.5 cents
Per gallon. So 1.5 cents per gallon. It could fluctuate. One thing that's important to that point is it was important to the administration, it was important to Deb Gould, the vice president, and I, that we're protecting the ratepayer throughout this as well. And we're trying to do everything we can to ensure we don't have a mid-year rate hike. So this is going to be helpful for that. The next motion that Vice President Dolan's going to talk about will help to describe some of the how. Good question. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none, this will be a roll call vote beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
From the docket of December 3rd, 2024, I move that the council adopt the following emergency preamble. That the Attleboro Municipal Council votes to take action as provided in City Charter Section 2-9B regarding the water emergency which presently exists relative to the mayor's request for the authorization to commit and utilize $500,000 of available unobligated ARPA funds to allowable water-related personnel expenses.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
None.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote beginning with
Sorry.
Mr. Lavoy.
Do you know the difference in cost from what we're selling to our ratepayers?
So this right now is to accept the motion as an emergency measure.
Okay.
I think that question we'll allow that in the next motion, but this is just for about the emergency measure. Additional questions? Councilor Tavares will begin the voting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
From the docket of December 3rd, 2024, I move to approve the request of the mayor as an emergency measure for authorization to commit and utilize $500,000 of available unobligated ARPA funds to allowable water-related personnel expenses.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
So this, as we spoke to the mayor and the auditor, Deb and Mason and the administration worked on, trying to find funds available to make this a little less painful. And there were unallocated ARPA funds. Of course, we don't want to give back those ARPA funds. We want to be able to use them for the benefit of the city. So that's what we'll be doing with this $500,000.
And before we get to Mr. Lavoy's question, I would also add to that, Deb did want us to make sure that we talked about the fact that there could be, as we get closer to the end of the year, there could be another motion like this that might come down. If, something that we might have committed or said, hey, this is what we want to spend the ARPA funds on, maybe it doesn't come to fruition for any number of reasons. Maybe we just need to reallocate. So we'll need to be flexible with that as these motions come down. I really credit, first of all, thank you to Mason, who's overseas serving this country, who's still focusing on Attleboro. So, that's great commitment from our budget administrator. But thank you to Deb, who's always looking at different ways and to really look at things outside the box. As far as your question, Councilor Lavoy, we're not prepared for that right now, but we can get that answer. I think it's different. Your question, if I understand it, is what's the difference between the ratepayer versus what we're paying to Mansfield in terms of that rate? We can get that. We didn't have that this evening. Okay. Good question. Thank you. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Waterman.
First, I want to thank Mason, if he's watching us, for saving this ARPA money, because you never knew when we're going to need it.
Sure.
I'm sure we didn't see this coming 3 months ago. Do we know if there's, if that's the end of the ARPA money, or do we still have some? I don't know if anybody here knows that.
No, that's a good question. We do still have some, and as I was just alluding to earlier, some of the projects that we have, we might have to reallocate some of that ARPA money. I believe that there is more ARPA funds that are unobligated, so we'll continue to watch that closely. As you know, we are coming to the end of it's a little complex, you know. Some of them had to be obligated by December 31st of this year, with expended by December 31st of next year. So a lot of moving parts, but I know that Deb and the mayor have committed to being available to talk if that happens, and to be able to bring down some additional measures if that is the case. Sure. Okay. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Okay, before we take the vote, one thing that I would like to add, Councilor Vice President Dolan and I, as we met with the mayor this evening, as we met with Deb Gould, we talked about getting regular updates from the mayor, from Courtney, and we'll figure this out, but we could be looking, and the mayor was willing to do weekly updates in front of the council, which I think is very important. I think it's important that as we go forward with this emergency, and this is exactly what this is, we're doing our jobs as elected officials to communicate with the public, and there is a lot of misinformation, and a lot of people are like, oh, I heard this, or I heard that. We need to make sure that if we're hearing anything, it's really incumbent on us to find out really what's going on, and if I can help anyway in that, please let me know. Vice President Dolan.
And also, the mayor and the auditor emphasized that if anybody has any questions, that you can reach out to them at any time. So they wanted to
Absolutely.
emphasize that any council that has any questions about this water emergency, that they can reach out. That's it.
Right on. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares? President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes. Vice President Dolan, very nice work with this. I know it was a lot of moving pieces and quite cumbersome.
Thank you. That's all the business for the Public Works Committee and Corporate Committee meeting at next appropriate time.
Very much. Councilor Holmes.
Thank you. Reporting for Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee from the docket of November 19, 2024. I move to appropriate $67,190.81 from account citywide undesignated fund balance free cash general government to account fire salary and wages.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
No.
Do you have additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes,
10 yeas, 0 nays.
motion passes.
Thank you. That concludes the basis, and I'll call for committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Holmes. Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. From the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to accept Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 22I, which pertains local options allowed for veterans' real estate taxes.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
No, sir. We discussed it in committee.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? This, just a reminder, this is in regards to the HERO Act, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. We will have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
On the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to approve the intermunicipal agreement to formally join Northern Bristol County Public Health Alliance.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
No, sir. We discussed it in committee.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
On the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to appoint Scott McDougall, 6 Greenfield Street, to fill an unexpired term on the Traffic Study Commission, term to expire February 2025.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
No, sir. We discussed in committee.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
On the docket of November 19th, 2024, I move to appoint Stephanie Elliott, 60 Brownell Street, to fill an expired term on the Planning Board, term to expire February 2029.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. Any comments?
No, sir.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Vice President Dolan.
Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to Stephanie Elliott. I thought she came across very smart and very dedicated and very enthusiastic. So I think she'll make a great addition to the planning board. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Ditto. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this is also a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
It's all for Personnel Better Human Services Committee. Call for a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Councilor Sawyer.
There is no business for the Zoning and Land Use Committee. I look for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Councilor Waterman.
And there is no business in the Transportation and Traffic Committee. We'll meet at the next appropriate time.
Very good. Councilor Tavares.
Thank you, President Delicio. Reporting for ordinances, elections, and legislative matters from the docket of June 25th, 2024. I move to approve the following proposed amendments. That Chapter 10 of the revised ordinances for the City of Attleboro be amended by adding the following new section, Section 10-15, Public Electric Vehicle Charging Stations and Rates.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Just by way of reminder, this ordinance allows us to regulate the terms and rules around charging stations in the city for our brand-new charging station right out here, as well as any future charging stations here in the city.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. From the docket of June 18, 2024, I move to amend Chapter 12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro by adding the following subsection, 12-7, Protection of Public Trees.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
So we discussed at length at our last committee meeting, but this essentially, this ordinance allows us to put on paper practices and procedures that Derek has already been using and been adhering to as the tree warden, as well as the superintendent of parks, and also allows us to be able to be eligible for grant money as we apply to become part of the Tree City USA community.
Nothing wrong with some grant money.
Yes.
Do we have any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. That concludes the business of ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. We call for a committee hearing at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Would you like to call for special committee?
Special Committee on Tax Abatement has no business for this evening. Call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you very much. We will recognize once again Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. Reporting for Special Committee on Classification Compensation. From the docket of October 1st, 2024, I move to approve the proposed amendments of Section 13-3.1 Classification Plan of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, City Ordinances.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
We discussed this in committee, and I think we're ready to move forward.
Do we have any additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of October 1st, 2024, I move to adopt the amended compensation plan pursuant to Section 13-4.1 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
No, sir, we discussed this one in committee as well, too.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
From the docket of October 1st, 2024, I move to adopt the new compensation plan for publicly elected officials pursuant to Section 13-5 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Yeah, yes, sir. I need to amend Section 13-5.4 as follows. Strike effective January 8, 2012. The annual salary of each member of the school committee shall be $3,863.50 and replaced with effective January 6, 2026. Each member of the school committee shall be paid 75% of the city council salary.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments on the amendment?
I just want to say this will take care of something that we wanted to do a couple of years ago that we weren't able to do. This gets the school committee members that have worked hard through COVID and continue to work hard and get them to a salary that is fair for them. And I do appreciate, the school committees, all their hard work and through some very difficult times. And I think this will take care of it.
Okay. Additional questions, comments, concerns?
If I could also say, for all of these, we know it's not a perfect plan, but there's been a lot of things. Some things have been tweaked, some things have been adjusted. It helps some, doesn't help everybody, but at the same time, I want to be able to continue to bring down periodically the administration along with personnel to make sure that what was promised is actually happening and make sure that, that we continue on to hear any questions or concerns from, employees or department heads or anybody for that matter, citizens. We still continue to listen to their thoughts and stuff. And then we can continue down and then make sure that this is working the way it is. Because this is to help three things. The citizens of Attleboro, the employees.
So, allow me to interject for a second. I think your comments would be better suited after the amendment.
Okay, sure.
So
Okay.
if we could just vote on the amendment.
Yeah.
If there are any questions on the amendment itself, then we can go back to your comments.
Good point.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. We're now back to the motion as amended, to which I'll recognize Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. So, getting back to being able to make sure that the plan is working the way it's working and that it continues to be fair to, all three parties involved. So, I will like to be calling down on it periodically, the administration, including personnel to make sure it is happening and, and if we need to interject or anything for that matter, we'll hopefully have that opportunity to do that.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? What I'll add to that, so I'm very glad to hear you say that you're going to have human resources and the administration come down. I think all three of these is a change. I think it's been quite some time since we've made the change to the class and comp plan. It's important, but I'm going to be looking, because I have some concerns still, and I think that my comments match all three. So to hear you say that they're going to come down is great, because I've got concerns about the merit bonuses. I've got concerns about how are we going to take care of those that are at the top of their steps, who've given so much of their time in their years of service and institutional knowledge. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
It's all for compensation classification, and we call for a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. There is no old business. We have one piece of new business, for which I will recognize Councilor Holmes.
Thank you. I entertain a motion to refer the following for study and recommendation to hire an internal city solicitor.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
None.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I will refer this to ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. That being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned at 9 o'clock.